Today is a very special Shabbat for many reasons. We're all overjoyed at the celebration of Mikey and Jared's Ufruf, an upcoming wedding. And for several of us, we've just returned home from a very inspiring, difficult, heartbreaking, and uplifting mission to Israel. Last week, we read about the portion called Shlach Lecha, where God and Moses instruct the people to send scouts out to tour the land of Israel. In fact, in our tradition, today is the anniversary of the scouts being sent out, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Our group ranged in age from their 20s to their 70s, and the scouts were charged with the instruction to see the land of Israel, to return back with a full report, the goal to encourage all to journey to our promised land. This Shabbat morning, we're going to hear from some participants from our mission of solidarity, of resilience, and hope. It's my honor to call forward first Brooke Zelwin. Come on up. The next contestant.
Shabbat Shalom. I signed up for B'nai Yeshurun's Solidarity Mission to Israel in May. For 8 months, I have been obsessing over the news coming out of the Middle East, and I wanted to see for myself what this country that I had visited 28 years ago, but that I still felt a strong connection to, was going through. I wanted to help, and I wanted to understand, and I am so glad that I did. I arrived in Tel Aviv on the morning of June 18th and immediately headed south to the Gaza envelope and plunged headfirst into the trauma that the country is going through. We began by visiting the city of Sderot, the biggest city attacked on October 7th and the closest one to Gaza. Often referred to as Rocket City, it has been the victim of over 60,000 rocket attacks since 2005, the year that Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip. Public bomb shelters are as prevalent on the streets as fire hydrants are in America, and are painted in bright colors, often with cartoon characters and happy scenes from children's literature, to minimize the trauma of growing up in a town where the citizens are under constant threat of fire. Our next stop was a guided tour of Kibbutz Kisufim, located under a mile from the Gaza border. The kibbutz was infiltrated by Hamas on October 7th, and 18 Israelis and 4 Thai nationals were killed that day, while another 4 residents were taken as hostages. There we saw the home of Shlomo Mansour, a Holocaust survivor who, at the age of 86, is the oldest hostage to be taken. His yard is decorated with his many craft projects, but his house has been riddled with bullet holes. We saw a home in which the residents, a young married couple, were only recently identified when their teeth were found amidst the charred remains of the fire that had been set that day by terrorists. We saw the second-story window that a mother pushed her children out of, taking the chance that they would be able to run to safety and survive. We saw the bullet holes on the walls of a home where Hamas militants set up camp while the family that lived there hid in their safe room for hours, holding the door shut so that the terrorists couldn't get in and kill them. These are just some of the stories that we heard that day. Most of the residents have been evacuated to other kibbutzim or are living as refugees in hotels. And yet, the kibbutz leaders and volunteers from the United States are showing up every day to rebuild the homes that were damaged by the fighting, to paint new murals on the shelters, and to plant flowers so that the people of Kisufim have a home to come back to. We visited the site of the Nova Music Festival, where memorials have been created for each of the 364 young people who had shown up to dance for peace in the desert and were gunned down as they ran for their lives. Many of the families of these young adults prefer to visit these memorials over their actual grave sites, as this was the last place their loved ones were happy and authentically themselves. We stopped at an outpost where off-duty soldiers can come for a hot meal and stock up on supplies. We did our share by bringing food from a local bakery and donating solar-powered phone chargers, sunglasses, and wireless earbuds. The outpost was being manned by observant Jewish women, and several female IDF soldiers were eating dinner, and both parties stopped to thank us for our support. Religious or secular, Israeli or American, there was a sense of solidarity and shared purpose that was admirable and bittersweet. On the second day of our trip, we were led on a walking tour of Ofakim, a poor immigrant community in southern Israel. Its residents cannot afford to have shelters in their homes, so when the sirens went off on the morning of October 7th, they ran outside to seek cover, and 50 people were killed in 5 hours by Hamas gunmen who were waiting for them in the streets. But amidst the carnage, there was courage. The people of Ofakim were able to fight back and eliminate all of the terrorists before they could reach the synagogue, which was about to let out after morning services. Raquel Edry was able to stay alive by offering the 5 terrorists who were holding her and her husband captive cookies and Coca-Cola. Jewish mothers are gonna Jewish mother, after all. But the people of Ofakim have not been evacuated from the town, which means they are living in homes with craters left from grenades, walking on sidewalks where their loved ones bled to death while they hid inside, and reliving the trauma of that day over and over again. Those first 2 days in Israel were heartbreaking, but it felt necessary to bear witness, and the people that we met wanted to tell us their stories so that we could take them with us and let the world know what happened to them and what they are still enduring. Everyone in Israel has been touched by loss. Everyone is praying for someone serving in the IDF, being held hostage in Gaza, or grieving. Our Shabbat evening service in Jerusalem took place in an open courtyard where barefoot children wandered to and from the playground, dogs sat at attention with their owners, and the clergy sang to music being played on guitars. At first glance, this could have been a service being held at my children's summer camp, but as Rabbi Tamar began her sermon, it was clear that this community was not immune from suffering, as it had lost a member of its congregation while fighting in Gaza just that week. And yet, instead of focusing on the pain and the grief, Rabbi Tamar used that week's parsha about the menorah to tell 3 stories demonstrating the light that is still shining in the world. From the Arab Israeli who was granted full citizenship after saving lives on October 7th, to the rival soccer fans who embraced after learning of their shared trauma, losing limbs and loved ones in Gaza, to the Muslim Yemenites who helped bury one of the last 5 remaining Jews in Yemen according to Jewish law. The repeated theme of choosing light and celebrating life to combat evil is something that resonated throughout the trip. Wanting to reflect on what I'd seen over the past few days, I spent Saturday morning in Jerusalem alone with my sketchbook in the park across the street from the hotel. I sat in front of Lion's Fountain, which was given to Israel in 1989 by West Germany. While sitting in front of the fountain, I witnessed families come and go, their children playing in the water and climbing on the life-size lion statues that surround the fountain. There were observant Jews, secular Israelis, and Muslim children splashing and shouting, and I wished the rest of the world could see what I saw: coexistence and peace. After Havdalah that evening, we met with a liberal Orthodox rabbi who spoke to us about how to win the war for the spirit of Israel. "We are at a terrible time of uncertainty," he said, "but we must hold on to our core values of goodness and hope." He left us with a glimmer of optimism as he headed off to a political protest in front of Bibi Netanyahu's home. This was such a telling moment, that one can have full support of Israel while also freely demonstrating against its leaders. This dichotomy could be seen everywhere we went, nowhere more glaring than at the Jerusalem shook after dark. There were plain-clothed soldiers eating and drinking with their semi-automatic guns slung over their shoulders, and dancing Hasidic rabbis waving flags for the coming of the Messiah. While part of me felt like an outsider looking in, another part of me felt like I belonged there more than I have belonged in any public space since October 7th. In Tel Aviv, there are reminders of October 7th everywhere you turn. The graffiti artists and muralists have created moving works of art honoring the heroes and victims of that day. Calls to bring them home now and photos of the hostages are so prevalent that by the time I left, I recognized each one as if they were members of my own family. On my last morning in Tel Aviv, I went for a run on the boardwalk. At 7 a.m., it was already 80 degrees, and when I finished, I kicked off my shoes and walked into the water to go for a swim, running clothes and all. The night before, I had scrolled through my newsfeed for the first time in a week. Over the weekend, a group of angry pro-Hamas protesters had blocked the entrance to a synagogue in Los Angeles. Another synagogue was set aflame in Russia. A Jewish girl was raped in France by 3 men who made her pledge allegiance to Islam while violating her. Before my trip, I never would have imagined feeling safer on a crowded beach in a teeny tiny country at war than I do as an American person, a Jewish person living in America. While physically I do not feel threatened here in Cleveland, I do feel paranoid in a way that I've never experienced before. Do I tuck my Star of David underneath my t-shirt or wear it proudly in the open? Do I respond to the ignorance and hate I see online or let it go unchecked? Do I post pictures of my trip or worry that they might offend someone? This is our challenge. How does Israel appeal to the international community, a community that has been at best ambivalent and at worst opposed to its very existence? And as Jews in America, how do we remain strong in the face of rising anti-Semitism? How do we explain that Israel is an imperfect place, but that its core values are those of life, freedom, and repairing the world? That Israel is in constant danger, and yet the only place that Jews feel truly safe? That Israel has suffered a devastating blow, but that it still chooses to focus on the light? I don't know. I left with more questions than answers. But I plan to continue speaking up in support of Israel, and I urge all of you to do the same. Advocate for Israel, educate yourself about anti-Semitism, and most importantly, visit Israel. You won't regret it. I know I don't.
Thank you, Brooke. Now, Zehava Galun.
Shabbat Shalom. That's a tough act to follow, but I'll try. Thank you, Brooke. I first want to thank Rabbi Hell for putting this mission together because it was really a one of a kind. I've never been on a mission before, but this one was just very well thought out. So I chose to talk to you about it, but two things that I touched my heart, in addition to everything that Brooke said, because everything, everywhere and everything we saw touched our heart. But one of it was we went to visit the Soldiers' Cemetery in Har Herzl, where we saw many, many, many graves of young soldiers. And on the grave, we saw notes, thank you notes that people wrote to them. And we saw pictures of them. And we saw notes that the soldiers themselves wrote before they died, and how they wish that everyone will carry on with their life, and it's their honor to give their life to protect Israel. And I don't need to tell you, it was heartbreaking. It was hard. We saw a fiance who just lost her fiance, and I think it was 2 days before, or something like that. She couldn't leave. She just couldn't leave him. She kept crying. I can't leave you here alone. It was heartbreaking. As we going around and looking at all these graves, you look around, and what do we see? A new troop of soldiers coming by the busload from the paratrooper brigade. And when you're in the Army, when you do your basic training, part of it is coming and visiting the soldiers who fell from your brigade, and they have a memorial service for all the fallen soldiers from that specific brigade that they're in. So you look around and you see all these young, beautiful soldiers that are happy to be there and ready to fight for Israel. And you're even more heartbroken because they're young and they're beautiful. All I wanted to do is hug them and just keep them with me. And they had the memorial service, and then I didn't even realize that after they visited Mount Herzl, they take him to the Kotel to swear them in to defend of Israel, which was even, when you think about it, just imagining that, it's really very powerful and heartbreaking, but also very beautiful and very meaningful. Another thing that I'd like to share with you is, I've been to Israel in April, and a lot of people said, why are you going back? Because I needed to really see the sights and feel it. And when we were in April, it was very meaningful also, and we got to talk to a lot of people, and we knew that the people are hurting. But you really saw the hurt of the people when we stay in a hotel, because there's so many people are out of their home and they're staying in the hotels. And think about it. Put yourself in the situation. They're staying in a hotel for 9 months, 5 family, 4 family, 1 little hotel room, very little personal object, no private space. They're staying there, and they're very grateful, and they're very happy, but it's not easy. We got to see them getting dressed in the hallway. We saw them getting the kids to school in the hotel breakfast area. It was just heartbreaking, and they don't even know when they're going back. They have no idea when they're going to be back in their home. But Israelis are very kind people, very special, very strong. Even all this and everything you heard from Brooke and all the sadness we saw, they are very happy. We got to see them in the cafes and in partying and on the beach because, they realize they live for today, and if they give up any of that, then what's the worth of fighting? So for that I say, Am Yisrael Chai, and thank you for listening to me.
And next is Asa Zoeckler. Of course.
Yeah? Every time I talk up here, they tell me I have to get closer to the mic. So hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Asa. I'm a newer member of the congregation. I've been here officially for about 9 months. So it was really important for me to go to Israel at this time in history. So I officially became Jewish approximately 9 months ago. It was 9 days before October 7th, was when I finished my conversion. So I had just joined this incredible, beautiful, diverse community, and then we were thrown into war with terrible acts of violence. So it was really important for me, the first time that I went to Israel, to be able to stand in solidarity with my new family. And it was interesting. So I wasn't raised Jewish, but I've always wanted to see the Holy Land. It's really important to people of the Catholic faith to visit Israel and Jerusalem specifically as well. So my whole life I had imagined going there, and it looked a lot different. This trip looked a lot different than what I had imagined when I was a kid, but I don't think that I could ever find the words to emphasize how amazing this trip was for me. So I'm going to talk about studying Torah in Jerusalem. So when we got to Jerusalem, we stopped at the Hadar Institute, and we got to study a Torah portion with Rabbi Avital, she leads Hadar in Israel. So we looked at an excerpt from Exodus. It's the part in the Torah where Amalek comes and Moses calls Joshua up and says, go pick people and go fight. And we talked a lot about what Amalek is, what that represents for us. And we talked about the Israelites' victory over Amalek. And the way that the Israelites were able to win that battle was Moses took his miracle staff, the staff that he used to part the Red Sea and to bring water out of the rock. He took it to the top of the hill, and every time he held the staff up in the air and the Israelites saw that, they were winning. Whenever the staff fell, when his arms grew tired, the Israelites started losing. So Aaron and Hur, they try a couple things to try to keep Moses' arms up in the air. They help him rest on a rock and stuff like that. But in the end, the way that the battle is won is Aaron and Hur are on both sides of Moses, and they're holding his arms up while he holds the staff. So then I had the opportunity with Rabbi Hal the next day to watch this Torah come to life in a small little Judaica shop that was right outside the shuk. So we're calling this my almost a tourniquet tallis. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a nurse. I work in the neonatal ICU at Akron Children's. I've been a nurse for about a year. And while Rabbi Hal and I were shopping for this tallis, the young woman who was tending to the shop, she was unpacking a crystal Kiddush chalice, and she cut her hand open pretty bad. There was a lot of blood. It was a little bit intimidating for me. My Hebrew is not anywhere near conversational, so there was the language barrier made it a little bit more difficult for me to help her out. But with Rabbi Hal's help and with the help of some very, very kind Israelis that Rabbi Hal found on the street, we were able to take care of her. And there was a moment where I was holding this young woman's hand up in the air to stop the bleeding. And in that moment, it was with Israeli people with me, helping translate, helping keep this young woman calm, and then holding her arm up to stop the bleeding. It really was Torah coming to life right in front of me. And like seeing firsthand the love and connection of just like everyone in Israel, like the people that Rabbi Hal found on the street had no questions asked. They came in and helped. They didn't hesitate at all. And it really kind of like reminded me and deeply ingrained in me how important it is that we hold each other up. And that's the history of the Jewish people. That's what we do. That's how we survive. And so yeah, that's all I got.
I have one last reflection, and this is not mine. Shira and Eric Schechtman are Zooming in from Maryland, but they Zoomed and joined us in Israel for our trip, and they have a statement that they'd like to share. Growing up in this congregation, Rabbi Rosenthal and the Heights Temple environment instilled an unbelievably strong sense of Zionism in me. This is Eric speaking. That has continued until this day. When we first found out about a congregational trip that was announced last summer, we were the first to indicate interest, and we actually booked our flights in July 2023. Then October 7th happened. Once the trip was reconstituted as a solidarity mission, we indicated interest immediately. With all the threats both in the south and in the north, we would be misleading you if we weren't somewhat nervous about traveling to a war zone. How would we respond if sirens sounded and the Iron Dome was activated above us? Here is the explanation. Since October 7th, we participated in many rallies, the largest by far being in November on the Mall in Washington, where we proudly welcomed you to our home. We participated in rallies in both DC and Cleveland. We thought that all of this is fine and good, but concluded that in order to really support Israel in its time of need, we have to put our boots on the ground and contribute to the Israeli economy. And so in the end, we not only decided to go on the trip, but we added a day on both ends. It was so satisfying to be physically in Israel after a much too long absence. This trip was one of the most significant, impactful trips of our lives. In the south, we saw the physical impacts which Brooke talked about. Bullet holes, burnt-out buildings, places where rockets landed, cars attacked by RPGs and burned completely. But that was just the physical impact. At the human level, before we went over those 8 months, we saw videos of people interviewed or speaking. But now in Israel, it's another thing entirely when the people speak directly who were affected to you, one-to-one. Going to Jerusalem and the Kotel, every visit to the Kotel is impactful, and this time even more so. On Shabbat morning, we went to the conservative yeshiva's Fuchsburg Center. Many of the attendees there were on different missions, and we proudly represented B'nai Yeshurun in Cleveland. Eric had his first ever Aliyah in Israel. Every day we were exhilarated for being in Israel, especially the days in Jerusalem, while also at the same time our hearts were breaking. We encountered displaced peoples in all 4 hotels, and I want to note that every hotel we stayed at, 80% of the occupancy were displaced Israelis. There are more than 100,000 displaced Israelis from the north and the south, and as Zehava said, they have no idea if their homes even exist, much less when they're going to go to their homes. In Jerusalem, at our hotel, they were from Kiryat Shmona in the north, which unfortunately has been targeted by Hezbollah. Significantly, in our hotel, there were dining rooms set up, there were kindergartens and preschools and everything set up in any space throughout the hotel. We were proud to lend a hand on our last day of our trip, packing boxes for Holocaust survivors and other needy. In our 10 days in Israel, we experienced people going about their normal lives as best they could. The markets in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem were active. The beach in Tel Aviv looked like beaches in so many places, except that is for the only in Israel Frum Beach, single-gender sections set up. Most wonderfully, there were babies everywhere. Many times we encountered Israelis expressing gratitude that we made the trip, ranging from hotel staff, shop owners, and everyone on the street. We extend our sincere gratitude that we were able to go experience Israel in such a meaningful way and return safely. See you all in Cleveland in mid-July. Thank you to the Schechtmans. I hope that this is just an opening of our conversation. It was so meaningful to be in Israel with all 10 of us. We had our little minyan together. We were your scouts. We were representing each and every one of you in Israel. We spent your money, so you have to help us with that. We ate falafel for you. We'll bring some back for you the next time. But truly, we bring back the hope and the resilience. The hope and the resilience of our brothers and sisters who know that times will be better, that even with this incredible darkness, there will be light, and there is light. We felt so much light, even from the hostage family that we met, where 2 brothers are still being held after 274 days in captivity for Yair and Eitan Horn. We have hope. We must have hope, because Od la'avda tikvatenu, our hope is not lost. There will be peace, and Am Yisrael Chai. Shabbat Shalom.